I've had a coworker that I've worked with for years, was not easy to work with. And I remember I was crying one day and I said, Lord, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm at this crossroads. And I just, because I had gotten to a point where I'd had enough seniority that I could actually not have to work with them at all. I would have been able to get a workload that would have, I'd gone my way and they would have gone their way. And I felt wrong doing that. There was just this sense of wrong in me. I don't know if it was guilt. I don't know what it was. And I prayed about it and I realized if I go, then who will love them? Because no one else wanted to work with them.
My name is Cheryl. If we haven't met, I'm one of the pastors here, and I get to have the opportunity to interview some very amazing people. Just a little bit about their stories. Before I do that, I have a couple of just comments of explanation as to why we're doing this. And so you've probably heard us, if you've been here over the last couple of weeks, you've probably heard us talking about being on mission and that your 9 to 5 matters. And often in the Western church, we're very good at saying if you're in some sort of full-time ministry, official ministry, or you're a pastor or whatever, then your work really matters. And if you work during the week, then good luck, I guess. And that is actually not the way that we want to view work. We want you to view your work. 1 Peter 2:9 says that we are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a people belonging to God. And that's every single one of us in this room. And those of you who are listening at home, it's not just those of us who are on salary with the church. And in Ephesians 4:1, it says to live a life worthy of the calling that you have been given. And so each of us has a calling in our lives, and work is a huge part of that. And so without preaching another sermon before we get started, I just want to say that means that your work is also full-time ministry, and that it is also a calling for you. And it is important because whether you do work in a church, or if you are working in the marketplace, or working in the home, or you're a student, whatever the work that you do is, that's the way that we participate in God's grand purpose for this world. And it's how we partner with God in bringing the order of his kingdom to the chaos of this earth. And so we fulfill instructions through our work that Jesus left us before he ascended back into heaven, that said, go and make disciples. That's work that we are all doing. And so we're going to talk to these two lovely people who view their work as ministry. And I'm going to interview them. We're going to lean into their stories, and our prayer is that God would help you see your work in a new light this morning through their stories. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves first for those who might not know you.
So my name is Angela Mancini. I am a high school English teacher. I teach grades 7, 9, and 11. So from the wee ones that come in, and then to the ones that are clawing at the doors to get out. So that's my profession, what I do.
Thanks, Ms. Mancini. So my name is Jonathan, and I started a consulting firm about 18 years ago. And so we do management consulting for larger organizations, and we have a team of 28 that does that. So I get to lead that team.
Great. So my first question for you is, tell us what a week looks like for you in your world.
So a regular weeks, I'm an early bird, so that's a good thing. It starts really early, around 5:15 a.m. I'm usually at school around 6:40 in the morning. Classes start around 8:05, but the reason I like to start early is I usually do my devotional in my classroom. A practice I started a few years ago. I just find it creates an even tenor in the classroom. I ask the Holy Spirit to really kind of help me and guide me, because from one day to the next, your first period might go really well. You might have kids who've had a great day. You might have students who haven't had a good day, are coming in from a weekend that they're upset that Monday has arrived. It all depends. And so I just feel that starting the day off that way really helps me get grounded and allows me to be a better teacher for them. And yeah.
So this one I felt like I was going to be one-upped by Angela, so I've been working in this area too. No, I start the day relatively early, not because I'm a morning person, but I do drop my daughter off at the bus at 6:50, and so that, just forces me to get into the office early. My team usually starts around 9:30, so it gives me some time to do some devotions and to kind of sort of prepare for the day, like Angela said. And also I like to journal, so it also gives me, I find in just life, and I think a lot of us are probably feeling that, there's a lot of stresses and fears and concerns for the day, and so it gives me kind of a chance to write those things out and to spend a little bit of time praying about them, and it sets me up, I feel it sets me up well for the day.
All right, and what do you like most about the work you do?
I love I love teaching. I think I love working with adolescents. I think I knew that from a very early on. I loved being in youth group. I loved working in youth group. I loved teaching Sunday school. And so I think part of it is also being a lifelong learner. I like to learn. I like to engage. And so that really propelled me into, I guess, the teaching profession. And that's probably why I've been doing it for almost 25 years now. So it's a passion. And you have to really want to do it and love to do it, because it is a very grueling job, especially today.
Yeah, so for me, what I think there's two things that I really like, and that sort of drives my enjoyment of my job, and I feel like I do have one of the better jobs. I love my job, is people and community, and how those two come together. So I love building teams, and I'm curious about people and how they work and how to make them fit into the right spot. So I would say that the part of my job that I feel the most rewarding would be if I find somebody and get them in a spot that really is a perfect fit for them. And I love bringing a team together that works well and sort of seeing the pieces that all come together.
You sound like a teacher, John.
All right, and when did you start to see that your job was more than just a job and that it was more of a calling?
So I think it took, well, just to explain, when you start teaching, you don't know what you're going to teach, you don't know who you're going to teach, you don't know where you're going to teach. So, for example, I studied to teach English and history, and by the time I started teaching, there was some English, some history, but I also had to teach geography. There was a time when I taught math, and so it takes a long time to feel that you have a good footing, and that took about, I guess, 5 years until I had my own courses, my own class, and so I was able to build a repertoire. And then you can start thinking about, wow, like I've done this before, so now I feel more comfortable, I guess, looking at the students and how can I speak into their lives? How can my teaching strategies be different so that they feel cared for, valued? I think that's where it became more of a calling. Once I had a very sort of foundational and steady footing, I could turn my attention to not the sort of rat race of, creating a new lesson plan of something I hadn't taught, but going back and saying, well, I've done this before, how can I improve it, and how can I change it to engage students in the classroom more? And that's when I think I started to feel that I could start speaking into their lives more about my faith, and not so much talking to them about Christianity, because obviously as a teacher you can't do that in schools today, but how could I show them that part of me that cared for them, loved them, and wanted to help them become who they wanted to be.
The way my business started out, I guess is 18 or 19 years ago, was I worked alone for the first probably 8 years, and that was fine. I was doing the work and I was getting projects, and it was going okay. But I got given a project where I had to lead a team, and it was a team of 3 or 4 individuals, and we kind of set up a morning meeting where we'd all connect, and through that process, I realized, I really love to have a team, to lead a team, to sort of pour into individuals, to see how that team works together. And so that was kind of a turning point to me to say, this is actually really what I want to be doing. And so that's where I started to create my own team. And that's the piece that kind of fuels me and drives me. And I love to see that, a group of people working well together.
The world would not be in a good place right now, which is why I am where I am. What does it look like for you to live on mission in your day-to-day life?
So for me, that is, well, let me think back to, so I think a couple weeks ago, my husband and I are part of Alpha, and Roger had brought up 1 Corinthians in our group. And he had read the whole thing out, and 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the chapter on love. And he had said, these things remain: hope, faith, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And that really stuck with me, because being a teacher and not being able to share openly my faith, it kind of made me realize I can in so many ways, and that's in being more patient, being kind to the students, not keeping a record of wrongs. And I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of times students will have a really bad experience with one teacher, and they come in and then they feel like they've been blacklisted, like I'm the bad student. And I think it's so important for them to understand that there's a clean slate all the time. And even when things go wrong, to approach them that way, for them to know, no, you made a mistake, let's keep moving, let's keep going. You're still loved, you're still valued, you're still cared for. And with teaching, when you have 30-some students in a class, I've had 39 at one point, how do you do that? How do you really individualize? How do you look at each one? And that takes time. And but I think that's part of what I felt my mission was, to look at the ones that felt that I'm not seen, or I'm not the popular one, or I'm not the one that, people usually call on. And I was like, but I'm going to call on you. And I'm going to notice you. And I get very emotional when I talk about it, because adolescents need to know that they are valued, that they are loved, that they have purpose. And so many of them don't know that they've been created with a purpose. And so another way I bring that into my classroom is I have a wall of quotes. And some of the quotes I put up there, I have, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. I don't put where it comes from. I have, be strong and courageous. And sometimes they look at me and they're like, oh, who said that? They're like, did Shakespeare say that? And I'm like, I don't know. You'd have to look it up. But it's just, it's in just being intentional with them. And I think that's where I find my mission is, in having them feel that I see them. And in so doing, I would hope that at some point they would know that God sees them also.
I think for me, it comes down to Jesus provides a supermodel on how to lead a business, and the idea of being a servant and serving your team, to care for your people, to see your people, to listen to your people. I think that is just an amazing guide. I think it's a guide that a lot of times it's pretty distorted right now, and so the idea of kind of going back to how did Jesus live and how did Jesus walk, and to try to do that, to be willing to forgive, to be humble, is not typically how business operates as well. So I think you're kind of playing against two things, at least in my world. And one is there's a pretty distorted view of Christianity and Jesus, and there is a belief that you got to use people almost transactionally, to, how much profit can I get out of this person, or how much harder can I make them work? And I think it's kind of sort of switching that and saying, okay, you know what, that is not how we're going to sort of run our business, and that is not how we're going to take care of people. And Jesus threw some good parties with lots of wine, so we also do that as well too.
It's a holistic practice. I love it. So Angela, what are some of the tensions that you have to navigate between your faith and your workplace?
As a teacher, you can't share your faith openly, especially in the classroom. But that doesn't mean I can't share my faith with my colleagues. So that's sort of where there are times where I can spend time with them. For example, if colleagues are going through something or experiencing something, I can say, I'll keep you in my prayers. And, they'll look at me and they know I go to church. They know it's a very important part of my life. They know I'm a Christian. And so sometimes being able to do that with my colleagues is where I feel that I can share with them my faith. However, in the classroom, it's much more difficult. And so that's where it has to be much more, in a sense, part of, living my faith and expressing that to my students rather than openly speaking to them. And I think Chris McQueen mentioned the quote this morning. What was it?
Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words.
That's right. Preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Right? So I guess in the classroom, it's more the actions that I take versus verbalizing my faith. And then with my colleagues, I get more of a chance to actually speak to them.
For me, the idea of looking for opportunities to have conversations that are authentic, and I do think people, if they ask me about my weekend, and I say, that I was, at church Sunday morning, I try to just keep it as natural as possible, and sometimes that leads to another conversation about, why do you do that, or, but for me, it's trying to kind of make it be as transparent as possible, and I certainly don't, I'm careful about, sort of choosing my times, and I think that's something that sort of me growing up, sometimes I was in a community that would pick the wrong times and would sort of be pretty pushy and pretty almost arrogant about it, and I sort of reacted to that a little bit, so I'm pretty careful about that piece. That being said, at one point in time with one of my larger clients, I got the nickname of Father John, and that was kind of just in fun. It wasn't malicious in any way. They were kind of nicknamed me. But for me, it was kind of a nice. It opened the door, because I also find when people are in crisis, and I can remember a situation where somebody's mother was in the process of passing away, and they were obviously struggling through that, and they knew that there was something with Jonathan and his faith, and so they did reach out to me, and I had an opportunity to have a great conversation with them and provide a little bit of peace and guidance. And it was the other piece of that, which was kind of interesting. They were at their mom was at the West Island Palliative Care Unit. We're a community as well too, and so Chris, I was able to have a conversation with Chris as well and make some connections there. And so it's neat when all those kind of connections come together, and I think we do this together. There was another very quick story is another person was in crisis, and we were having a party at our house that was a combination of people from my team and some employees, and somebody came over to me in the corner and said, "Do you go to the same church as that guy, Greg?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, I really need you to be praying for me in my situation. And so certainly I never told her anything about that. Somehow she knew that this guy, Greg, who may be familiar to some of you, and I were both involved in that, and I was able to kind of connect, Barb in to pray, for that situation. So I think those situations, come around. I certainly don't push them, and I think that would be wrong for me to do that. But when they arise, I try to be faithful to them as well.
Great perspective. So what are some spiritual habits, Angela, or practices that you have that keep you grounded in your faith while you're at work? Because I know even for me, when I work here, I can get task focused and be like, just do the things. And so I need grounding. I think we all do. So what do you do?
I think the morning devotional helps a lot. And as you may all know, working with teenagers can be very taxing. So a lot of the time it's, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? Just keep those words in the back of your mind. When someone's being, a little snippy or not cooperative, how can I manipulate the situation to work this for good? So I think that really helps. And I think praying a lot. Having also other teachers who are Christians helps a lot also. So like Diana, who's in the room, and being able to also share with other Christian teachers sort of what you feel when you're in the midst of, being at school, and how do you navigate? How do you deal with, let's say, coworkers, who are not easy to work with. And I think one of the good things is, and I believe John mentioned it, is this idea of being humble, and people really notice that. When you're humble and you don't kind of have to force your own way or strong arm someone, and you're like, you know what, that's okay. They really notice. And it's like you said, the workforce today is, what can I get the most out of someone? How can I, it sounds kind of sad to say, bleed them dry of, every ounce of strength they have. But when you kind of step back and you work with people and you make them realize, you need more time, that's fine. Or how can I help you so that we can meet that deadline? Or when you take the time to say, something's going on, why don't we talk about this first before we jump into whatever project we're in? People take notice, and they start to understand, like, wow, okay, they see me as a person, as someone who, isn't just there to work. And I think that is important in that.
Yeah, I would say the idea of that in the morning, spending some time like we've already we talked about, and I would say it's something for me that I'm working on as well. The John that you get at 9:30 in the morning might be different than the one you get at 3:30 in the afternoon. So it is something that I'm actually trying to be a little bit more mindful of. Okay, how do I take a few sort of maybe breaks throughout the day to show up in a way that's healthy and caring and kind.
How do you live out your faith in contexts where it's not always possible to verbalize your faith?
I think it's like we said before, in our actions, in everything that we do, we're saying something, and I think today more than ever, those actions and how we take them, especially in love, like when we are patient and kind, we don't keep a record of wrongs. People really notice. I've had colleagues come up to me and be like, how come you let them talk to you like that? Like, didn't that upset you? And I'm like, yeah, it did upset me, but they might be going through something and I don't know. So I'm not going to all of a sudden be on the attack as well. I'm like, it's bad form. I'm like, let's let things cool down and we'll see what happens later. And when you approach them afterwards, like, I was so shocked that you didn't, you didn't, go talk to our AD about it or whatever it might be. And I'm just like, well, I just want to talk to you. I want to know why that happened, and I think taking that approach with people, not thinking that everyone's always out to get you, but that people themselves are struggling and maybe need time to talk about what they're going through, which is sometimes comes out as an attack, but really isn't, is how I think we can do those things. I mean, demonstrating people a little more love than the rest of the world gives them. And I'm like, we were called to that, And so I think so many times in the Bible when Jesus showed people love, everyone else was out to get them, but he just showed them love, and it completely transformed their lives. And I think that's what we have the capability to do, is transform people's lives through those actions that we take.
Yeah, I think for me, the idea, one of the things that I think separates us out a little bit in a world that can tend to sort of step on each other to get ahead is the ability to admit when we're wrong, and to try to build that into the culture and the area that you're working in is not so straightforward. But I think when you're willing to be humble and admit that you're wrong and be a little bit vulnerable with your team, I think that goes a long way, and that I think makes people curious about, well, why is that? Why are you willing to do that? And I think those are good conversations. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question 100%, but the idea, at least I've seen in sort of my circles, is being willing to admit when you're wrong and own that is something that isn't always obvious in sort of the business space that I'm in, and especially the kind of work that we do in management consulting. Your job is to look smart and to be credible, and our team definitely is, but you also need to be willing to say, hey, I didn't get that right, or I got that wrong.
Was there a time in either of your lives where you just came to a moment, and you can feel free to tell the story here, but you came to a moment of just like, this is why God has me here in this moment. Like, I am here for this reason, for such a time as this.
I think I've had a lot of moments like that, but like I said, I think it really is, I think I have a heart for students that go unnoticed or that are struggling. Because when they're struggling, their families are struggling, and it puts a lot of undue pressure on them because, when they go home, it's like, how come? Like, you could do better, and parents have great intentions. We believe in you, you can do better. But sometimes things don't click, right? It can be maturity, it can be frontal lobe development. There's so many things happening with young adults, young adolescents. But finding them there, right? And so when they do something right, or they've passed something finally, and I get to pat them on the back and say, look at this amazing mark you got. They're like, yeah, miss, but I just passed. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, passing's great. And then they're like, yeah, that's good. I'm like, the next step, you can, let's try and make it like 10% more, and just giving them little tiny challenges that they can meet. And then, being at a parent-teacher interview and having a mom say, it's so hard. I'm working so hard with them, and they're just getting by. And I'm like, yes, but that's because you're working hard with them. And being able to hug that mother at the end and say, whatever you're doing, mom, keep going, don't stop. Because it is difficult, and sometimes some parents have 2, 3 teenagers going at the same time. And so, yeah, I think it's just speaking into the lives of those people, the students that are struggling the most, their families, emailing their parents constantly, letting them know, look, things aren't going great now, but, there's still next term, there's still in a couple weeks another quiz coming up, and just giving them that hope that it does get better, and at some point they figure it out, and it might not be where you wanted them to go, the expectations you had, but they will figure it out.
I think one maybe just a little story that I felt, okay, this is, maybe I'm on to the right track here, or this is where I think I should be, is recently somebody decided to leave our company, and I think those times when people are leaving your company, whether that's my decision where I need them to move on for whatever reason, and or they choose to leave, those are difficult times to show your care for that individual. And I was meeting with one of my managers who I really trust and who's fantastic, and I was saying, like, I find this really tough that this person's leaving, and I have a don't like it when people leave. I really kind of, there's something about it. I'm pretty relational guy, and there's an element of somebody leaving my team that actually hurts, and I don't like it. And we weren't supposed to get emotional in this kind of thing. And they turned to me and they said, "Well, John, I think you're going to actually have to toughen up a little bit. Like, you're going to have to be, like, that is going to happen. That is kind of what you do." And I thought about it, and then I realized that no, I'm not going to toughen up. Like, that is who I am, and I want to care for my people deeply, and I will have to make difficult decisions, and I will have to, let people go, and we will deliver excellent results. But I'm not going to stop really caring for those that work for me, even if they're moving on.
That's really good. So what advice do you have for everyone who's listening right now who might be wrestling with how I share my faith in my own workplace? Does it matter what I do? Those kinds of questions.
I think it absolutely matters. It doesn't matter where you're working. If you love the Lord and you have His love in your heart, then you need to pour that out. You need to love people. And to love, and it's not easy. I will be quite honest. It's another story, sorry. I've had a coworker that I've worked with for years. Was not easy to work with. And I remember I was crying one day and I said, "Lord, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm at this crossroads." And I just, because I had gotten to a point where I'd had enough seniority that I could actually not have to work with them at all. I would have been able to get a workload that would have, I'd gone my way and they would have gone their way. And I felt wrong doing that. There was just this sense of wrong in me. I don't know if it was guilt. I don't know what it was. And I prayed about it and I realized, if I go, then who will love them? Because no one else wanted to work with them. I'm sorry, John, you're like
It's the couch. It's the couch that does this.
It's our living room.
And I didn't leave. I stayed. And I've been there for over a decade. And I've had many opportunities to work with others. And I said, no, because then who will love them? And so my mission after that was, and this was someone tough, I'm talking someone who wants their own way all the time, someone who's going to get their way, non-negotiable. And I started to realize, well, why do I have to have my way? I'm like, it's not really going to change anything. And so I just started to pour into them love, like affection, kindness. When we were done a meeting, I would hug them and they'd be like, and then now we're at the point where when they got off the phone with me after we've spoken, they say, "I love you." And that person's life, it took a decade, but that person is not the same person I started out with. They are more flexible, and even other teachers who've worked with them say to them, they said yes. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, they're willing to change the book. And I'm like, I know. And so they just needed to be loved and heard and felt that they were being listened to. And that completely changed who they were. And so it wasn't easy. That road was really tough. And I could have left, but I had said, no, I'm not going to, because then I won't be able to pour into them what they need. And what I needed too. I needed to learn also that in tough situations, if you can run, it's not always the answer to just go, right? Sometimes you have to tough it out and ask God, I need that, spiritual peace. I need, Lord, more so that I can give more. Yeah.
Well said. And I would just echo what Angela said, in that I think if you care deeply for people, and you can see that, in Angela, you care deeply for people, it's going to make an impact and it's going to point them in a direction. And I think that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example of self-sacrificial love that Jesus showed us that you were showing. Who will love them if I don't? I really like that. Well, is there anything else you want to share? Jeff Day, this is our last question, so if you want to get ready. Anything else you want to share? Or have you said it all?
It's the hot mic.
Oh, go ahead. You take it. Wrap it up.
No, I mean, I think we've kind of said it, and it's kind of neat. Angela and I work in really different spaces, but in a lot of ways, I feel like it kind of boils down to let's be known as a group of people that work and care deeply for people, even when that hurts a little bit. But we want to be known as those that care for those around us, and whether that's at work or here in our community at Westview, I think we're called to care deeply. And I think people will notice that, and that will people know, and so that would be my thought.
All right, thanks you two. Let's thank these fellow laborers.